Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salebox for the 22nd of December 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit, rounding up your daily Steam deals. I apologize, I didn't do a video yesterday. I was very busy, I was doing a tournament, actually doing 2 tournaments, and things got a little late, so I wasn't able to finish it off. My apologies, sorry about that. We'll try and keep things going. I don't necessarily think I can promise you anything on, you know, Christmas Day, but we'll see. You know, videos over the next few days are going to be sporadic. I'm trying to do the whole family thing if it's all possible. Anyway, let's begin with Rogue Legacy. 67% off. That would be $4.94, €4.61, and £3.95. This is a really evil roguelite platformer with some combat elements, quite a lot of them in fact. The point of Rogue Legacy is that you are one in a line of heroes who fail consistently to defeat a castle. The quest is then taken up by your offspring, who you pick from a genetic family tree and may have certain genetic traits which may or may not actually be any good. The game is rock hard. It kills you very, very quickly, and it has no qualms about it. It has certain rogue-like elements to it, in the sense that there is permadeath. The levels are procedurally generated, but you'll certainly find rooms that are very similar to others, and the structure of the castle will, for the most part, remain the same, so it can't get completely ridiculous. It does have a hell of a lot of replayability. That's what I will say about it. I think that Risk of Rain actually has a better combat system overall, because really the combat system of Rogue Legacy consists of little more than 1 spell, maybe 2, and then your sword, which only has 1 or 2 attacks at most. So it's more of a platformer than an actual combat game, in my honest opinion. There's a lot of nasty platforming going on with it, which means I tend to prefer Risk of Rain because it's more combat focused, but I think Rogue Legacy will be very enjoyable for you if you like the idea of dying over and over again and upgrading your estate so that you gain access to more classes and more abilities. I did find that later on, the cost of the upgrades to your estate increases exponentially, meaning that you actually gain less and less upgrades the further you get. So if you're not making good progress by that point, it's quite easy to hit a wall. Whenever you go back into the castle, you lose all of your money. So if you don't earn enough money in that run to actually get an upgrade, you've basically wasted your time. So that's a bit of a problem with it, but really it just comes down to whether or not you suck at the game as to whether or not you run into that particular problem. For that price, it's definitely recommended if you're looking for something with permadeath that offers a good challenge and has an emphasis on platforming with a little bit of combat thrown in there for good measure. Shadow Warrior, 75% off. That is $10, €8.74 in Tier 1, €6.24 in Tier 2, and £7.49. This was, in fact, number 5 in my top 10 games of 2013, the 2013 remake of Shadow Warrior, not in fact the original from 3D Realms. Flying Wild Hog did a phenomenal job with this game, they really did. It's a gore-splattered, hilarious thrill ride with an excellent melee system as well as a good number of guns with upgrades and all manner of nasty beasties to chew your way through. It's absolutely littered with ridiculous one-liners, and in my opinion, it's the absolute best FPS to come out this year. Really enjoyable stuff, actually, coming from Flying Wild Hog, some of the ex-producers of games like Payne and, of course, Bulletstorm. It definitely shows, especially considering that the scoring system is pretty much Bulletstorm light, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what is going to come from Flying Wild Hog next. It's a really enjoyable first-person shooter, guys. I would strongly recommend it. Just don't really expect anything other than killing hordes of enemies, because that's what this game does. It barely has a storyline. What storyline it does have is absolutely bloody ridiculous. Crusader Kings II, 75% off, that's $10, €10, and £7.49. Almost universally acclaimed is this particular grand strategy, one of the best games that has come out in the last few years from the guys over at Paradox, but it is not a game that I have actually played. I've got to say, I don't play grand strategy at all, so that is to be expected. I have a feeling, though, that I might change my mind with Crusader Kings II. I've really been looking at it an awful lot over the last couple of months thinking, should I? Should I play this game? And everyone around me says, yes, absolutely, play it. It's really, really good at what it does. It is a grand strategy game that focuses on the period of history between 1066 and the 1500s. It's a game of territorial expansion and political intrigue. And it's really a game that I can't tell you anything else about, so go and watch Northern Lion's videos about the game instead. He'll actually explain it to you. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to Crusader Kings II. Witcher 2, 75% off. That's $5, €5, and £3.74. Repeatedly discounted, but one of the best RPGs on PC at all, ever. It's really, really good at what it does. Laden with loads of free DLC, it's a rather fantastic third-person action RPG for the most part, with some really nice moral choices, and by nice I mean not remotely nice. Very little about this world is nice. It actually sets up a rather realistic world in the sense that everyone is really just out for themselves with their own motivations, and morality is a hell of a lot grayer than most other games. That, I think, is the real strength of Witcher 2. They've also improved the combat system significantly over the original, which, frankly, I did not enjoy the combat system of whatsoever. This time around, you've got a title that is incredibly enjoyable to play and also very, very challenging, and is laden with free updates and DLC as well, which is absolutely fantastic. Witcher 3 is, of course, on its way. Now would be a perfect time to grab this if you haven't already. Admittedly, this is on sale every few weeks, so you're not really missing out if you don't pick it up this time around. That said, if you don't already have it, then what the hell are you doing? Max Payne 3, 80% off, that's $4, €4, and £2.99. It's also $5 in Australia. Now, I'm gonna be honest, it's hard for me to really bring my heavy criticism down on the game at that price. At full price, at the $60 it came out at, I think, in 2012, then it's very easy to criticize the game and the way that it tells its story. It has a much bigger focus on cutscenes than the previous Max Payne games, and I feel that really does not help the game at all. It holds your hand a little bit too much, it doesn't give you as much freedom in the levels, the multiplayer mode is basically a waste of time. Max Payne 3 is, in my opinion, the absolute worst of the series, by far. Max Payne 1 and 2 are much, much better games. That said, Max Payne on its own, if you can deal with the lengthy cutscenes and the constant interruptions to the action, is pretty good at what it does. The actual combat mechanics, when you get to use them to their fullest degree, are not too shabby at all. They're certainly improved over Max Payne 1. I don't necessarily know if they get to Max Payne 2 levels, but they are pretty good nonetheless. So it really comes down to your tolerance of the way that they tell the story. If you're a fan of the original games and you like the way that they did things, then you may not enjoy Max Payne 3 because it deviates and goes kind of down the Rockstar storytelling method of just shoving cutscenes in your face and shouting at you from the rooftops, "Look at our budget." However, none of that really matters because, for the love of God, it is $3.99. That's an absurd discount. It's more than 90% cheaper than what it was on launch, which is just absurd when you think about it. So, yeah, by all means, get Max Payne 3 for that price. I mean, why the hell wouldn't you? Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, 75% off, that is $5, €5, and £3.74. That's the price for the Game of the Year edition, which you'd think includes all the DLC, but it actually doesn't. It's got the big stuff, Knights of the Nine and the Shivering Isles expansion, but it's missing the little stuff, like the Spelltome treasures, the Vile Lair, things like Maroon's Razor, which are small pieces of DLC. I believe the Horse Armor is probably included in the Deluxe Edition as well, so if you want the complete experience, you've got to get the Game of the Year edition Deluxe, which has got everything along with it. A lot of that DLC isn't necessarily really worth having, but for $1 more, it's kind of hard to argue with. So Oblivion, I actually really enjoyed, surprisingly enough. I felt that Skyrim was a step back in terms of the questing quality. Now, don't get me wrong, Oblivion has plenty of its own problems. Indeed, pretty much all of the Elder Scrolls games have a ton of problems. As per usual, the main quest line sucks, the world doesn't really react too well to what you actually do, and the combat system is just terrible. The scaling is a real problem in Oblivion as well. That said, the game has been out for years, which means there's a ton of mods which actually fix pretty much all of those problems. You can find them over at the Elder Scrolls Nexus. That's nexusmods.com/Oblivion or /Skyrim, whichever you prefer to go to. There's plenty of places that you can find some really good mods for this particular title. And Oblivion actually remains my favorite Elder Scrolls game. Maybe it's just because I put an awful lot of time into it, but Skyrim never really captured me. Oblivion did. It looks a little dated these days, but hell, back then it was one of the most amazing looking games ever, and it's still not a terrible looking one, but my god, they couldn't make faces in that game. I don't know what the hell was going on with it, but there you go. Elder Scrolls Oblivion, open world, first person RPG, and I would strongly recommend that you mod it, but worth experiencing, I think, merely for the Shivering Isles, which is absolutely fantastic and completely madcap and imaginative. Antichamber, 75% off. That takes it down to $5, €4.74, and £3.74. This is a game that challenges you to throw away your preconceptions of video games. It's a first-person puzzle game with a rather interesting art style. I don't think everyone's going to like the aesthetic. It's very high contrast, let's just put it that way. Rather odd to say the least. But especially at the start of the game, you will find some puzzles which really tease your brain in different ways. I feel that Antichamber is one of those rarer puzzle games that really goes out of its way to make you think differently in order to actually solve its puzzles, and that in itself is worth applauding. It will make your brain melt out of your ears, and it is very much designed to get you out of your comfort zone and think about things in a different way. There aren't that many games that do that, and many less that do it well, so as a result, I'd absolutely recommend Antichamber if you are looking for a first-person puzzle game. If you hate puzzles, Antichamber is certainly not for you, even though I'd recommend, trying it anyway, simply because you might be surprised by how much you actually enjoy it. Tomb Raider, 80% off, that is $10, €10, and £8.99. I was surprised to learn that they were releasing a definitive edition of this game for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. It surprised me in particular because the definitive version's already here. We've had it since March of this year. It's called the PC version. A really fantastic looking third-person action game which borrows a hell of a lot from games like Uncharted. It's a cinematic third-person action game, and honestly, it does what it does pretty well. I feel that it tosses a few too many of these light survival elements in which really don't serve any practical purpose, and it doesn't really dedicate itself enough to those elements for them to really be worthwhile. I also feel the character development of Lara is a little weird. She makes a very quick transformation from scared girl fighting for her life to mass murderer. It doesn't really take too long for that to actually happen, and that to me was a little bit jarring. There's also an overemphasis on collectibles, and if you're looking for the complex puzzle solving and platforming of the original Tomb Raider games, you're not really going to find it here. The actual tombs in the game are usually single-room puzzle platforming sections, but for the most part, the game is actually open world. Now, I really enjoyed that because I wasn't really into the original Tomb Raider games, but I have a feeling that some of you won't. Also, if you don't like QTEs, that's another thing to point out. This game is chock full of those damn things, particularly in the first couple of hours. Thankfully, it does a little bit less of it after that, but yes, the QTEs are rather obnoxious. A good game, though. Really nicely put together, and a nice reboot to a franchise that was quite frankly on its last legs. And that brings me to my deal of the day, which is Dragon Age Origins, 75% off. That is $5, €5, and £3.74. There is the Ultimate Edition as well, and this is decent value. It includes Dragon Age Origins Awakening, which was the expansion pack, which, in my opinion, wasn't quite as good, and then all 9 content packs for the game. A lot of those content packs, though, aren't particularly great. And a hurricane just started in the background. Right, you're going to hear a little bit of wind and rain by the sounds of it. Do not worry, everything is fine. One of the best content packs for that game is actually Stone Prisoner, which came free with the game. It was part of the whole Project $10 thing that EA was doing at the time, and that includes a new character as well as a new quest for that character, and it's a very, very good one indeed. But the content packs for it otherwise were a little bit dodgy. Warden's Keep wasn't very good. It took about 30 minutes to beat, gave you a couple of spells and, like, one thing, the party storage chest. And you also had Return to Ostagar, which wasn't that good either. 2 of the DLC packs were actually gifts, if you can really believe that, which is just absolutely absurd at that point. And then you had a bunch of other campaigns that were released. The Darkspawn Chronicles, Liliana's Song, as well as the Golems of Amgarak, and things like that. They added little side stories for the most part, and anywhere between like 1 to 3 hours of extra content at the most. The thing is, the actual game has enough content in and of itself. You don't necessarily need the Ultimate Edition, but if you're looking for the complete experience, it's only a few dollars more. I think Dragon Age Origins on its own is really, really good at what it does. It is actually a game that I played to completion. I think I spent about 90 hours doing so. Did everything I could, and I was really happy with it. I thought the method of storytelling was really good. I think it managed to do the grittiness and the grimdark without overdoing it too much. There were every now and again, areas of the game that I thought were unnecessarily gratuitous just for the notion of being hardcore and being a gritty adult RPG. And as usual, BioWare completely ham-fisted all of the romance options, as they have a tendency of doing. However, the combat system, particularly in the tactical isometric style view, actually reminded me of old school CRPGs, which I liked an awful lot. I had to pause a lot, give tactical orders to your comrades to make sure that nothing went wrong. You could die very easily. I played on hard, so I really enjoyed my experience doing that. And overall, it takes you to a lot of very interesting places, meeting a lot of very interesting characters, and I think it's got some of the best well-written side characters in any of BioWare's games, though I do feel that while the NPCs are pretty strong, the actual party members may be not up to the level of something like Mass Effect 1 and 2, but regardless, Dragon Age Origins is a really great RPG with some nice old school leanings, plenty of really good dialogue, and lots of awesome quests. Some people really hated the section in the Fade. There is a mod which allows you to skip that entirely. In fact, there's an awful lot of mods for this game, so again, that might be something you want to look into. So yeah, there you go, Dragon Age. You should get that if you want to sink a huge amount of time into an RPG this Christmas, and it's a hell of a lot better than Dragon Age 2 was, I'll tell you that for a fact. So no, you're not missing anything if you skip that sequel. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Salebox, and I'll see you next time.